Assalamualaikum. Welcome to the panel discussion about Muslims in US media, hosted by AMCOB, which stands for Allied Muslim Chamber of Business. AMCOB is a membership-based social enterprise with a mission to create a thriving Muslim business community. It's the power of collective wisdom, continued learning, and thought leadership brought together for Muslims by Muslims. Our core belief is that business leaders thrive when they have access to a supportive community of peers who challenge and inspire each other. If you are interested to learn more about AMCOB, please visit www.amcob.org. On behalf of AMCOB, I would like to welcome Yousuf Siddiqui, who will be moderating this session, and he is the co-founder of Rung Film Festival. I would like to welcome Yousuf Siddiqui, who will be moderating this session, and he is the co-founder of Rung Film Festival. I would like to welcome Yousuf Siddiqui, who will be moderating this session.
Assalamualaikum, Kashif. Thank you for welcoming me and putting this session together. Again, my name is Yousuf Siddiqui, founder of the Rung Film Festival, which is the first South Asian Pakistani-American film festival that's in person in the United States. It's going to be in Houston on May 4th and 5th. So glad to be here. I'm really excited about our panelists today. In the interest of time, let's just get to the panelists right away so that they can give a quick intro of themselves. We'll start off with Sadia. Sadia, can you introduce yourself quickly?
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Yousuf, for welcoming me, and Kamal for inviting me. Can you hear me okay? My name is Sadia Ashraf. I live in Los Angeles, and I am a screenwriter and producer. I work with a production company called Traveling Picture Show Company. We do around 3 to 4 really dark murder mystery type of, films a year. And with them, I have formed another production company called Rising Tide Films, specifically to amplify the voices of Muslims in Hollywood and to tell untold stories. So we have been busy optioning a few projects with them that I helped to develop, and we're excited about what the future holds because it's very important, I think, to have Muslims have voices in the media and entertainment.
Thank you for being here, Sadia. I would like to invite Faran on the stage and for him to share his what work he has done.
Hi, my name is Faran Tahir, and thank you so much for inviting me. I have heard such wonderful things about this organization, and I'm glad that I could contribute and be part of this. I am an actor, writer, producer, director. I've been doing this for the last almost 30 years. Got my education in this, got my MFA in performing arts, and have been fortunate enough to work in film and television on stage. I just finished a show on Broadway called Kite Runner, which we did for 6 months and got wonderful notices for. I've done some good, wonderful, big budget movies, some small independent movies, television, all of it. My whole idea as a Kite Runner being a good example of it is that I think it is imperative that we tell our stories. And I know that there is this idea that media is controlled by other people, other communities, other powers. I understand that, but I think it should not stop us from taking a more aggressive stance and actually trying to put our own stories out there, because I don't think anybody else has the responsibility to tell our stories. We do. Nobody else needs to do that. So I think our emphasis should be on trying to bring stories, not just real life stories, but the kind of creativity that we can bring to the table. And that has been my focus. And I'm hoping that with panels like this, with forums like this, we can take this conversation to the next step. And that has been my focus.
Thank you, Faran. Menhaj, can you?
Hi, my name is Menhaj Huda. was born in Bangladesh and moved to the UK at a young age and grew up there. I worked for, decided to get into film and TV almost 30 years ago now, and I've had a reasonably successful career in the UK, and then I moved to the US about 7 years ago, and I've been pretty busy since then. And I recently met Kamal. I also know Faran because I was trying to get him into one of my movies a few years ago, and I'm very aware of the quality of his work and his talent. And I totally agree with what he's suggesting, and it would be great to see more of our stories being told from our perspective rather than other people's perspective. So I'm hoping that I can progress that in my career now that I'm here in the US. You're muted.
Kashif, you're mute.
Sorry. Sorry about that. Happy to have you here, Menhaj. Kamal, would you like to share about your background?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, thank you for hosting this, Kashif, and big shout out to AMCOB and the organization for helping this, the first sort of Muslims in US media event. I think it's really important. I think echoing all the other panelists here as to why we're here. So thanks to anyone listening in. It's such an important piece of, I think the amplifying Muslim voices, which is kind of the theme. And as a result of that, and you can see my background, I've obviously got a short film that I'm privileged and honored to work with Menhaj, Faran, all the team here, in fact, have contributed in some way and will continue to in Sadia. So I think, it's for me, it's an opportunity for us to collectively help each other. Again, we welcome all faiths, all backgrounds, but here's a story that I think will hopefully inspire others to do more as well, and just to inspire others to bring their own stories and to collectively, get the groups here talking more with each other so that we can do this more on a regular basis.
Thanks, Kamal.
I believe, Yousuf, you're back now and everything looks good. So I'll hand it over to you to run it. And
sounds good.
All right.
Perfect. So Faran, we'll go to you first. How come Muslim voices in the U.S. media are not as amplified as they should be? What do you think are one or two things that are real barriers?
Faran's on mute.
Sorry about that. So I was saying that I think that's a wonderful question. I think we need to go back and look at the history of it for a second. I think we are now at a place where we have the numbers in the U.S. I mean, I'm speaking specifically of the U.S. The immigration of Muslims was for the most part, a later phase than other communities that came to the U.S. So we're gathering our mass, we're gathering our strength, and I think it is finally time that we should get into the media. Having said that, I think one of the biggest hindrances that we have is that partly I think we don't understand the power of media. I keep saying this over and over again, that we live in the age of media now. Battles and wars are fought and won in media before they're ever fought or won on a battlefield now. The war of opinion is a major part of who we are now. But there seems to be a misunderstanding to some extent that media is not something that we as a community should be investing in or being a part of. There's some kind of there's some kind of a taboo around it that seems to be part of it. But we also seem to have a love and a hate relationship with media. We can't get enough of it. But if one of our childs or one of our brothers or sisters wants to go into it, it becomes the whole household blows up. So I mean, having said all of this, I think our biggest impediment in trying to tell our stories, there's no dearth of stories coming from creatives of our part of the world. I think the real dearth, the problem ends up being the funding. I think we don't have regular streams or sources of funding these stories. And I think there is a misconception that the financial models of a project of film or whatever is somehow the other not profitable. And I think we need to break that idea that people have. This is an industry that's been around for a very long time. And if you look at it, and I'll finish. If you look at it through all the upheavals of the world, entertainment has always been a steady stream. The trends change, but the need and the ability to create does not change. Anyway, I'll stop here.
Thanks, Faran. So with all these barriers and opportunities, Sadia, you still ventured on to become a writer and producer. Tell us a little bit about your journey and why you stuck to course despite all the barriers.
I think just to piggyback a little bit off what Faran Tahir said, which is very important, is that our community does not actively go into these markets. I did my master's degree in English literature and language, and I was working very heavily on post-colonial studies, post-colonial literature. And when I was doing that at Loyola University Chicago, I was able to get Bapsi Sidhwa to come and speak. And then I instituted a lobbying effort to get her book into post-colonial studies, because at that time, there was nothing for Muslims that was taught in American, schools, or college departments that had Muslim characters. We had something from Salman Rushdie, and again, the conversation about it was very much like Muslims are barbaric, Arabs are wild. I think the historical context of why Muslims are missing in the media is we are partially to blame because we don't leverage our positions of power in this space. We're very successful in tech. We're very successful in other, fields. So, but going back to my personal story, I'll try to make it as short as possible. What happened with me personally was I was on a very big track to become a college professor, and I got into the PhD program focusing on taking this lobbying that I did to get more Muslim novels all over American universities. I took that chance to do my PhD thesis in post-colonial studies so that I could get more of the colonized Muslim novels, like colony writing back to the colonizers into the curriculums. But what ended up happening was life took an interesting turn. I left my PhD, became a mom, and I went into media. And I worked in corporate media for a long time. So my job was to work in any kind of company that would hire me to kind of do a lot of media for them. I worked at NASA for a while, and that led me to understand the landscape of broadcast media really well in Chicago. After 10 years of working in media and traveling almost 3 times a week, I ended up moving to Los Angeles because I realized I cannot make such a big difference. We have to tell the stories of our community. So I went to UCLA. It was a second career. I did my screenwriting. While I was doing that, I was working in a corporate environment, again, doing broadcast media. And my professor at UCLA said, you keep talking about these voices, you keep talking about diverse stories, but then you're working in media. I was like, I have 2 kids, I need a job. He was like, in order to be successful, you need to have that risk. And I think that's where our community struggles with, and it's very natural when you're an immigrant community, is we're risk averse. My husband's an engineer, my sister is an engineer at Google. Most of us are doctors and engineers because those are safe careers. My daughter is now going to USC screenwriting. And I was a little bit sad, personally speaking, when I saw that she was going into my career, because there's no natural trajectory in it. It's like going in a pretzel, several pretzels. And I'll try to cut it short, but I'm proud of her because she didn't go into it because I asked her, but because she was motivated and she made a documentary on the Uyghurs in high school, and it won a few PBS awards. She won a lot of scholarships, and that is, I think, the future, alhamdulillah, is if we all kind of work together, prop each other up. And that's why I formed my own company, Rising Tide Films, because after UCLA, I ended up working with a very successful production company, and we have no problems making films about mainstream American projects. But on the side, I started to pitch the smaller Muslim projects, and I found a lot of resistance. So I think, to cut my long answer short, I formed Rising Tide Films in the hopes that Muslims can rise up and work together. Thank you.
Thanks, Sadia. Menhaj, you have a specific and unique vantage point in the sense that you've worked in media in the UK and the US. Do you have any insights regarding what the difference is, and if one part of the world is further along from a Muslim perspective?
The first thing which is the big difference, is that Muslims and South Asians are not the smallest minority in the UK. They're like one of the biggest, if not the biggest. So we have a big presence there, and generally in all fields, in academia we excel. Lawyers, accountants, doctors, Asians have been traditionally very good at lifting themselves up in that arena. I took the unusual decision, having graduated from Oxford with a degree in engineering, that I was going to go into television. And I think that decision, was not necessarily a straightforward one, but it was willing. It was kind of compounded by a summer I spent in Los Angeles after I graduated, and ended up working at the Fox TV studios as a page. And that kind of opened my eyes to what the possibilities are. And I kind of caught the bug, went back to the UK, trained as an editor, and then essentially made my way up. I had a break very early on in my career to be able to have my own show as a music show that I'd come up with. But what I was doing at that time was not necessarily focusing on the community stories. Obviously, it was part of my existence, but I was very much kind of focusing on how to break into the mainstream. And and one of the things I noticed was I was one of very few non-white people that was working within the industry. And I say that because the number of Muslim people within that group is even smaller. So it makes it that much harder. But as you enter the industry, what you realize that there's so many different aspects of it, so many different kinds of work that people can be encouraged to actually just participate in. Even if you're doing catering, if you're catering for film and TV, you kind of get into that world, and then it allows you to have a look and then transition into something else if you feel that that's what's for you. But it's very easy for kids, and certainly, for me 30 odd years ago, to look at it from the outside. It's very daunting. It's very much like, I have no point of contact in the industry. There's no way I can make that. So to break into it was a huge kind of achievement for myself personally. But then once you get in, to actually be able to progress and establish and maintain a career, and to have, some kind of security about how you're going to live and bring up a family and all that, is not straightforward at all. So, in terms of creating stories, by the time I had started working in scripted, like the first, I'd say 4 or 5 years of my career as a director was in non-scripted. So I worked on all different kinds of shows. But then as I started getting into scripted, the idea of a voice and actually telling stories became much more sort of crystallized. And that's when you start noticing, like, well, what are the barriers? Why is that story being told by a white writer? And it is a Muslim story. And I think for me personally, I certainly noticed the big shift in the UK was after 9/11, because like there was a big, I'd say, you know, I broke in the 90s. There was a lot of momentum behind just, you know, Muslims or South Asians definitely moving up in a big way in the UK, in media and entertainment in general. And then after 9/11, there was a big sort of shift, which, nobody realized, or I certainly didn't realize until about 2 or 3 years later, when I could see what was going on with the output from the UK. And it was heavily the voices were all being of like Muslims and South Asia were all being kind of very suppressed, and we were getting a lot of stories that were focusing on the terrorists and what have you, and it's kind of, that's the hill we've had to try and get over and sort of try and address that ever since. And I think now, I'd say in the last 10 years, the industry has shifted again because of streaming, and actually it's become much more democratized, and it has allowed us to actually try and fill that gap. But I'm still like, I still struggle to see how we do this and get seen more and have access. And so when I see an opportunity like Kamal's film, I kind of jump on it, because that's kind of what I want to see. You know, I feel like I want, I want to make stories that focus on Muslims being like regular people, you know, stand-up people, rather than, you know, what we've been seeing for the last couple of decades.
Thanks, Menhaj.
Yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of Kamal's movie, let's move on to Kamal so he can talk about it. Kamal, of all the topics as a filmmaker that you could have chosen, in Almost Home, you chose a very specific topic about Muslim in the military. Tell us a little about what inspired you and why this topic.
Yeah, good question. And I'll just to give you a little bit of context. I myself also started out, you know, first time I actually, my dad was a doctor. First time I actually saw me perform was actually on stage playing the lead role in a West Side Story when I was about 18, and right there, and I realized that a non-white person can play it, and it was an opportunity to kind of go into theater, and then I joined the National Youth Theater and so forth. Similar journey in the UK. I'm just saying that, but it was, my expectation was probably not that I was forced, but to come from that background. So I just want to build on what Menhaj was saying, is an opportunity for us to, and I toyed with corporate life, didn't quite feel as happy. So I really enjoyed being in the media world. To come to your question about, you know, what inspired me. Look, it's part of my journey. It was like, why not, when those things happened to me? It was like, why can't we be just as present as Muslims? Why can't we play the lead roles, or be representative, be patriots, if you like, in the US or wherever you are, in whichever country you are, and also be a practicing individual, practicing Muslim. I, for myself, have seen in the UK, of course, you know, there are lots of Muslims, but there's so many Muslims here in the US as well, having transitioned here. And look, there's almost 2 billion Muslims in the world. Is it really representative on screen? I don't think so. And I think the second part of this is, you know, I myself, while we all might have experienced some sort of prejudice, we also want to make sure that we are looking at it in a positive way. How can we be the change makers? How can we do that collectively as a group? And what I mean by that is, when we have almost 2 billion Muslims, it's no secret that we sometimes feel frustrated with what the media might be talking about. So rather than complain, can we do something? Can we put our funds together, put the artists we have here and others in the community and the producers, put them together to build out that and to effectively tell a compelling story. And this story, you know, is close to my heart. It's not something that I've been toying about it for 2.5 years. And of course, we can all do other sort of different types of genres. But to me, telling a story about somebody who is effectively just as passionate about being in the country and proud to be an American, but also Muslim, the struggles that they face, just like you said, a normal, you know, regular person. And so,
and speaking of that person, Kamal, we have Rayyan, who just joined. He is one of the people that inspired you to make the movie, and would love to get Rayyan's take as an ex-Marine. Rayyan, just introduce yourself and what was your experience?
Yeah, definitely. I'll start off by saying never ex-Marine, always former Marines.
Okay, yeah.
But
Duly noted.
no, you're good. Appreciate for you guys having me on this panel as well. I do apologize. I know I was running a little late, but I will say I joined back in 2004, early phases of our Operation Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom operations, and I had the opportunity to go out to Iraq and experience some of the stuff on the ground, and a lot of media and propaganda that kind of comes out, not necessarily very true until you kind of hit the ground and talk to the locals and understand their perspective from it as well. Obviously there will be always prejudice because there's always two sides of the coin, right? Some of the folks, I would say, have a misunderstanding necessarily, like from just listening to one side of the story versus understanding it from the other perspective. So I would definitely say I've seen both sides, and I've had the chance and opportunity to educate a lot of our Marines that are on the ground, and having the understanding to make sure that not everyone is what you think it is and how it's portrayed as well. So definitely something I've had the chance to at least give that understanding from my level and be able to see that from both ends. And I'll kind of pass it back off to you.
Yeah, thanks, Rayyan, for sharing that. I want to bring up a topic that isn't talked about that much as far as the media. The Muslim media community in the U.S. talks about it a lot, but Muslims in general in the U.S. don't talk about it, and that's funding. So Muslims invest in a lot of charities, very charitable in general, raise a lot of money for important causes. However, there's not a lot of money that's really makes its way to media projects specifically about Muslims by Muslims. If we can talk a little bit about why that is and how that can be changed, that would be really helpful. Faran, I know you have experience in terms of how the funding flows and what some of the challenges are. If you can kick us off, I'd love to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very important question that needs to be talked about a lot, because I think we need to get to the bottom of it. I think part of it is that, as you said, charitable donations or that source. I think that's a wonderful thing, but to me, this industry is a viable investment opportunity. I think charitable sources tend to dry up after a while, because charity has to do with what is happening, where our hearts are at this moment. In this business, again, as I'm saying, that this myth and this idea has to be broken, which is that this industry does not have viable financial models. And what I suggest to people is that there's traction, and there is a way to make a decent amount of money on your investment. I think that has been the biggest issue. Most of our community does not understand the models that we use in this industry to attract investment and then give a return on the investment. It's like any other industry. I think there is a disparity, and there is a disconnect between our community and this particular industry.
Maybe if we have a subsequent discussion, I'd love to focus on the different models that are out there and what kind of multiples we're looking at when it comes to investment in movies. And speaking of investment, Kamal, you're about to launch this project. Sadia, you have a project. How did you raise money for your projects?
Well, I'll answer the question as we're talking about it now live. I mean, look, I'll be honest. This is one of my first productions. I'm an actor. I've obviously been on camera. I'm a singer. So for me, I'm going through that process, and I think that why not reach out to the community at hand, or that we have, and especially if it resonates with them and it's a compelling story. Some of you guys are more experienced in raising money, but I think it's a constant challenge for everyone in the industry, right? That's the first thing people ask for. So when you offer help, they say, well, I want something that most actors don't, which is I want money. And but we've also got to, so usually it's how you relate to the project. Usually it's because you're passionate about the project, rather than sort of saying, hey, well, I need amount of funding and this is the ROI on it. Financiers out there understand those things. They know where they can invest their money in the stock market. They know where to maybe take, even if they have lots of money. It's more about how you that particular story or project resonates with you. I think that's really important. But I'll open it up to Sadia, who really has a lot more experience in that, and she can comment, and maybe some of the others like Menhaj. I think that's my view on it, and this is why I'm talking about this particular project and how I think it resonates with some of the folks here, whether you are in media or not.
So I've had, thank you for letting me speak on this topic, Kamal, and for asking this great question, Yousuf. I think I've had good experience in raising financing from people in Los Angeles or people in the film industry that do this because they understand the performance metrics, the ROI. They also understand that there is going to be a risk always. My company, TPSC, Traveling Picture Show Company, we're mid-sized. We have budgets that range from $3 million. We've done projects that are $300,000, and then we did one project that was $12 million. So it can range. However, as you've seen technology catch up in the past few years and quantity has become stronger in Hollywood and quality has slightly gone down, the budgets for films since streaming became popular have definitely gone down because we're producing a lot more content and maybe sometimes a lot more quality. So I have worked on the more independent side, but the reason I joined TPSC or Traveling Picture Show Company is because they're also a financing company, and one of the cool things about them is it's run by two women and they've never lost money. So to Faran's point that our community needs to also understand is that this is a viable entertainment business. It is not just a charity where we are putting money in, but these stories that represent, I forget if we're 2 billion Muslims at this point or 1.8 billion, but we have an audience, which is why, although I come from the live action world, and I started off my career 5 years ago as a producer. Before that, I was strictly a screenwriter, producing a film with Gina Goff Productions called Senior Moment with William Shatner. The way that we get a lot of financing is always egg before chicken, because after the good script, we are told to go and package it. When we package it, we find a great director, and then we find the actors. In the olden days, a writer would be hired to do a film, and you would sell the script or not. Nowadays, the demands of Hollywood have become tougher because packaging it means you need to go to a production company that is mid-level, find some financing, egg before chicken again, go out there, find the director, attach some big names to it, and once you've attached the names, that's when you can move forward with the production of the project. But this is why I started animation, because I might want to talk about that at a separate time, but I want to talk about animation for Muslims because I feel like we need to change the narrative about our people, but with animation, we can do that when people are younger. So
that's terrific. Thanks, Sadia. And Menhaj, any thoughts, any insights from you as far as financing your projects is concerned? You think you're on mute?
I think the complicated thing about this from both sides is that we want people to invest in media and film and TV, but at the same time, having been through this process several times with investors who are not savvy about the media industry or the film industry, it's actually not that straightforward, like for either of them, because I've run into a lot of complications working with people who have money, they want to invest in a film, they want to invest in your project, but then because they kind of call the shots, because they're the financiers, it becomes very tricky when they want to make decisions and choices which you just know are not going to be for the benefit. So that's a sort of game that we have to play and go through. And in that sense, what you want is, if people are serious about investing in film, is you want to just get them to have a management system where they're handing the money over to people who actually understand how the business works, and then they're the sort of gatekeepers to it. That we don't have that yet. And if we could, set up something like that, maybe your organization could do that, in terms of, sorry, not your, I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
Then that would be a way forward. I think it's really like counterproductive to sort of go to individuals, and especially like when we're talking about like a business proposition, we're not necessarily talking about a short film. We're talking about maybe a TV show or a movie, and like a 5 or 10 year plan for, like, having a slate of projects that we're going to try and achieve something at the end of it. That needs to be done in a really professional way, and not like you're playing the stock market. It's not the same thing. And that's what I would say. It's really important for people to understand that, and for there to be some kind of a setup which allows investors to have some comfort that actually, we understand what this is, and then it's up to them, like, whether they want to take that step or not. And I think what we're here trying to do is encourage people to say that there's definitely a market there. There's like there's a whole audience which is not being served, because the filmmakers and the films that are being made don't really connect with them. They watch everything. We all watch Succession and Marvel movies and Star Wars. Everyone does that. But there's if you look at what's happening with Asian films, like like Past Lives, like films like that, from the film from last year, The Farewell, stuff like that. It's aimed at that audience, but it crosses over to a global audience, and that's where the success becomes. We can be doing that. We can absolutely be focusing on developing and producing those kind of projects which have a heart and actually are about our community, but then have a global sort of reception to it. And
So
people
how
have
do
to
we
get their head around that.
So how do we create? So if I were an investor and I was looking for Muslim media projects to fund, is there a one-stop shop somewhere I could go to? There's so many entrepreneurs, people in business who would love to support and promote Muslim projects, media projects specifically, but do they have a place to go to find out what kind of projects there are, what rings close to their heart in terms of causes? Where does someone go to do that?
Rising Tide Films.
Yeah, I was gonna say we have 30 IP, intellectual property, that we were founded last year. But what we did was we went around the world and we found the world's, we think, best Muslim stories by best newspapers, best books, and our criteria was simple: either your book was a best-selling novel with 1 million copies sold, or or your book won a ton of literary awards. And the only reason we were putting such a tough criteria on that, if we were getting IP from a book, was because we know that unfortunately Hollywood has become all about IP, and I'm sure Faran and Menhaj could talk about that way better than I can. And IP has become so important that everyone is regurgitating. We have new Harry Potters, so I want, for Muslims, adventure stories, tales in which they're not necessarily in the mosque or, victims, but going on adventures and doing things that everybody else is doing with just their background being Muslim. So those were the kind of stories that we were searching for. And one of our first, which we actually have not announced yet, Unmarriageable, was based on a novel that we are now producing with TPSC. But the sale of that project from CAA Books all the way to where it is now led us to find a lot more IP like that. And we went to Turkey. We bought 2 IPs from them to develop here. Then we went to Broadway plays. We got Radical Comics, which is done Oblivion with Tom Cruise, and a lot of projects like that that had Muslim characters in it that we bought or optioned. And then we partnered with Traveling Picture Show Company to work on those projects. But where I found resistance was when I was doing just the mainstream American project pitches, we had no problems with getting them set up. And I really would welcome more opportunities to connect with like-minded Muslims to make these stories happen.
That's terrific. Is the pinnacle of success getting your project, whether it's a feature or whether if it's a series, getting it on Netflix, Hulu, Amazon? Is that what a lot of Muslim filmmakers, media producers, is that what they're shooting for, or are there other venues that also can be seen as a successful outcome of a media project?
Well, I'll take that because nobody's speaking. Well, a couple of things. Yeah, I mean, I think going back to the idea of do we have sources where we can go? Actually, we don't. I think, I mean, yeah, that's Sadia's source is a great one, but is there a general source where we can go and look into what kind of projects are out there? We don't. That could be something important that we could work on. What was your other question? You were cutting out a little bit.
So, what is an example of a successful outcome for
yes.
either a short or a feature?
That's an interesting question. I think that really we have to look at it from perspective of our community, but we also have to, as artists, have to look at it from a perspective of art. So I think that definition changes. It depends on what the story is. There are certain stories which will be great for Netflix, which will be great for Hulu, or which will be great for TV or this screen. There are other stories which are told best on a big screen. There are other stories which are told best in a theater. So I think we have to be refined and defining these goals. Similarly, I think the other thing that as a community that we should be thinking about, yes, we can talk about ROIs, we can talk about money and the green side of it, but we also have to look at the bigger picture. What is the profit and the benefit of investing in stories that are closer to our heart? One of the biggest things as we are finding out now that we have more of a base in this country is that the next generations coming up, and Menhaj and Kamal can talk about this because they come from a place where there have been several generations that have had the opportunity to create a base. We are at a very critical point at this point. People's ideas of us are slowly congealing and solidifying. And if we don't tell our stories at this point and let others define us, I think we're shooting ourselves in the foot. When our kids go to an interview, I mean, the consequences are larger, right? When our kids go to an interview and their name is, like my son's name is Javan Tahir. So when Javan Tahir goes for an interview and there is already a subconscious silhouette that somebody has created for a competent man named Javan Tahir, but that silhouette starts to infect or inject into the decision making, we have larger challenges that we have to deal with, and media gives us that opportunity. You see,
absolutely. So there's
an opportunity how to tell and show people. As Menhaj was saying, the reason some of these stories from Asia are doing well is because they are human stories framed in this, in this Asian world, but we can all connect to them as humans. And I think that's what we need to be looking for and trying to kind of create that for our audiences.
Yeah,
if I may add to that.
I'll just add to that.
ROI.
Just answering your question, Yousuf.
Yeah.
I think ultimately, what I would deem as a success is getting as many people to watch it as possible. Like, whether it's at a festival, whether it goes out theatrically in theaters, whether it gets picked up by Apple or whoever, Netflix, Amazon, as long as it's available and accessible and gets viewed and finds its audience, that's ultimately what we're all trying to achieve. And then beyond that, if there's recognition and, any kind of celebration from your peers about the quality of the work, great. But, that's less important for me. So,
and there's also the impact piece that's not around eyeballs and it's not around dollars and cents. It's in the case of someone like Rayyan. Rayyan, what does it mean for you as a Muslim Marine for Kamal to be making a movie about somebody who's a Marine who goes through that whole journey, and it's layered and colored with the fact that you have a Muslim background. What does it mean to you? What impact does it have on your life that he's making this movie?
Yeah, no, I'll say this is definitely impactful, and it touches home, right? Like for a lot of us that have served, not just in the Marines, right? Other armed forces branches as well. You have Air Force, Navy, Army, all branches across the board, right? Like it kind of hits home, and seeing this script and seeing this movie, definitely, I'll say it definitely hit home for me too. In early phases for myself, especially when we're coming back from deployments, where we're actually feeling these similar aspects of these things that are being touched in this movie as well, and which are true, 100% true. But how do we actually, and I look at this as a mental health awareness too, right? So this is another form of like helping those that are committing suicides and preventing that, right? From like, and then be able to associate themselves back into the civilian life, where it can be very tough for those individuals that are having that internal battle going on. So for me, this is like more of an interactive dava, right? I think I told Kamal and Menhaj, I mean, this is an awesome way of actually getting that out there. And even for those that are not Muslim, right? Like, I think it's a good understanding for them as well. And they can take a lot from this as well. So I think it's a great thing. And I definitely appreciate it from being a former Marine and a Muslim and Pakistani. I can say all these things definitely take a huge impact on this. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you, Rayyan.
Definitely.
And on that note, I think we're at 3 p.m. Pacific. We're scheduled to be on for an hour. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining today. Thank you especially to our panelists. I think this is the beginning of a discussion about Muslims in U.S. media. It's really not, wasn't an exhaustive discussion, or we didn't cover everything. There's so much. But hopefully Kashif and AMCOB could facilitate something in the future. But thank you so much for our audience that joined, and thank you, of course, our panelists.
Yeah, and if there are any action items that we want to follow up on, I think Kashif was mentioning, I think just to interject, Yousuf, that would be great, I think, to go forward from here. So thank you for hosting, by the way. I'd love to have some follow-ups and stuff as well from this discussion, and thanks for everyone for attending. I think hopefully it's been very useful.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay,
Yeah,
welcome everybody.
All right.